Hi, in this episode of the Sales Rewired podcast, Mark and I will be discussing objection handling. So that's everything from a couple of frameworks you can use, how to preempt objections, ideas on how to respond to the most common pushbacks you're likely to get, and even how to ask for objections. Yes, we want to take the fear out of objections and help you fall in love with them. So do listen, enjoy, and let us know what you think. Well, very good to speak to you again, Mark. We were going to talk this week about objection handling, which can send some shivers down salespeople's spine when they first get an objection. But my starting point is always the fact that all sorts of surveys, personal experiences, says that successful sales, the ones that close, have 3 times as many objections during that process than ones that don't.
Interesting.
So as that as a starting point, you should actually be more fearful as a salesperson if you're not getting objections, if you're not getting that pushback, because it shows that the customer's at least interested, at least they've thought about whatever the proposition is.
They're thinking, how will this fit my world? How will this benefit me? Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, and they're thinking, because if they don't have any objections, it means they haven't really thought about it to a sufficient amount of detail. So that's my starting point, is welcome objections to the point of seek them out if you're not getting any, which may be contrary to what people typically think. But what's your thoughts? And then we can maybe explore some individual typical objections people get and how to handle them.
Good. I've got a starting point to make. I love your starting point because it's not that it contradicts mine, because I fully agree with what you've just said. So these things are important to sort of put in place. But I'm very aware of all the sales books I read over the years and the various courses I went on back in the day. And also I've seen how my own clients handle objections and what the kind of given idea is for objections. And I've never been totally sure about what the general kind of, standard practice or best practice is. And what I mean by that is I'm aware that whoever they are, tend to train a lot of salespeople to handle objections. But I often think it's often like you're teaching them to wrestle a crocodile. And I often think it's like you're trying to persuade and shift the customer into buying. Or if you're making a cold call and they give an objection, I'm busy right now, or we already have someone who does this, they're training the salespeople to go, yeah, okay, almost not listen to them and force them into, here's why you should talk to me. So my starting point is simply the kind of ethical side of, should we be handling every objection that gets in front of our face? Or should we be seeking to understand a bit better and trying to help the customer get the right fit? Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And in practice, the objection typically is a symptom of something that's actually the underlying challenge. So one, for example, that we all typically get, it's too expensive. Well, if you take that at face value, maybe early stage salesperson is going to think, they haven't got the budget and I'm not competitive with my product or service, as opposed to seeing it as that high level symptom. And you dig deeper in terms of, is it because you don't have a budget? Is it because you haven't thought about what are you comparing it with? There's a whole opens a whole lot of questions underneath, which is how, back to the point you were making, Mark, about these frameworks and how people get taught to handle objections.
Yes.
I remember when I started, the framework was feel, felt, found, which was about showing empathy with the customer. You understand how you feel about the particular challenge or whatever it may be. A number of our customers or prospects that we speak to, they felt the same way. But what they found was when they implemented X, Y, Z, their sales went up, their customers were more satisfied, their processes were much quicker. So that's a useful framework just to reinforce more about the empathy that you want to start acknowledging what the customer's concern might be, and showing that they're not alone. That it's not something we haven't ever come across before. We understand that, and we know how to handle the management, and this is the upside. Now that feels almost a bit old-fashioned now, that kind of framework. Plus, you can only really use it once. If the customer comes up with another objection, you can't. I understand how you feel, and you can really
inflexible model.
Yeah. So say something else. It's a bit too too cliched, if you like.
Yeah.
But what? Because there's other ones. Are there other frameworks?
Yeah.
Or
Just looping that back to my point. So what my
yeah,
point was though is I think a lot of people are taught to use these just to keep chugging forward at the customer. So,
right.
so they hear the objection and it's just like, well, I'm going to mow you down because I've got tools, you know. So yeah, other people have felt the same, but what they found was, and it's just like, so my point was at the start, I feel like. A good professional salesperson needs a bit more empathy and needs to dig a little deeper to understand the fit and the value in the first place, and maybe then co-determine whether an objection really should be overcome and mowed down or got around via stealth means versus, oh, it seems you probably don't have budget at the moment, or you do have a competing priority that for your business you probably really should start with, and I'm not going to mow that down. You know, and do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. It's about listening and acknowledging, but that absolutely means active listening, not thinking how soon can I get in my feel, felt, found. You know,
Exactly that.
it's about listening, thinking of the appropriate question to dig deeper.
Yes.
As opposed to, I've got this, I've heard this objection before, I know how I'm going to answer it. Let me, just give me a gap and I will answer it in the way I've answered it 100 times before.
Exactly that.
Yeah, it is that listen, acknowledge, and then think about the best way of responding to it.
Perfect. So my take, you ask for any models, and this is why I said I've almost got some controversial opinions about objection handling, because there is the usual taught stuff, which I think baked into that is the assumption I am going to wrestle you to the ground, customer, and you are going to buy from me. I'm going to overcome every objection. And I've seen companies that do that. I know someone who started working for one, and we were talking about it, and he was saying how, I'm being taught, no matter what comes out of the customer's mouth, I am wrestling them to the ground, defusing it so that they buy. And that's a different, almost Wolf of Wall Street, do you know what I mean, side of selling. But my... part of my take is this, and I'll give just a few principles, but I'm all about establishing the fit and value, because nothing goes any further unless the full value is understood from the horse's mouth, from the customer's perspective, and explored, and then the fit is also there. It's not just the value, it's the fit. And then when you get that, let's say idealistically, when you get that perfect, which you never would do, it's all probabilistic. But if you did, there would be no objections at that point. It'd be like, everything makes sense. This is massively valuable. It absolutely fits. We've got the budget. We've got everything in place. And we're going ahead. This is brilliant. So that's like the end point that we kind of seek to get to. But I think that my take on objection handling is that an objection arises for one of two reasons, right? This is what I think. It's either that you as seller didn't understand the customer's situation and buying drivers and all of that well enough. So either you didn't understand them well enough and therefore you proposed something that doesn't quite fit, or the other way round. They maybe didn't understand you and your solution well enough. And I would say that that's almost certainly the reason why an objection occurs. It's a lack of understanding either between both of you or from one of you to the other.
Yeah.
So my suggested remedy is both of you, starting with you as the seller, you just have to seek to understand better than you have done. You need to seek to understand. Yeah.
You've summarised it really neatly into those two, fit and value. And actually, when you think of Zig Ziglar, his quote was, every sale has got 5 basic objections. There's no need, there's no money, there's no hurry, or there's no trust, and there's no desire. Those are the 5. Yeah. Which actually, each of those could be plugged into either there's no fit or there's no value, the trust and so on. So those 5 feel to me like good ones under the structure you just outlined, but those 5 are quite good, more tactical ones to just test. And the way I approach it and advise people is almost like it's an inverse qualification. If you're not getting objections, test those 5 things by asking the question, what challenges have you had in implementing this type of solution with my type of organization previously. That starts to, again, tease out if you're not on our supplier list. The size of your organization, may have some challenges with procurement. So turning that perspective of an objection being actually part of your qualification and teasing out where these 5 potential objections might come from. So you're getting it out early in the sales process.
Brilliant.
They don't come and bite you right at the end when you've got limited time to do anything about it.
Yeah, which all falls under the banner of seeking to understand. So you're exactly right. It's just giving you're using 5 examples there that are a brilliant framework to make sure you understand in these 5 areas, and you are going to increase your chances of not getting objected to because you're going to get the fit right and the value right.
Because you preempted it. Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I figured years ago, right? I was watching, I ended up working with a client, but I was watching how they were operating things before I came along to join them, and how they were teaching objection handling at the time. And I'd been on enough sales courses myself that I thought, I know what's coming next. Here's me being cynical, Alex, but I thought, I know what's coming next. It's your objection handling tool. So they'd talk about the rest of the sales conversation, all the stuff that comes first, but then they'd bring out a separate tool to handle the objections. But what I figured out at the time, I sat there and I thought, if you're having to handle objections, I would say that kind of indicates that you haven't quite done your job as well as you perhaps could have done at the start in terms of seeking to understand fully, establishing the fit and value so perfectly right. The very fact that an objection has come up, given what I just said, that it indicates that either they don't understand you as well as they might, or you don't understand them as well as you might. Well, what I realised was you don't necessarily need an objection handling tool. You kind of need to just go back to your conversational process and just do it again on the objection. Right? So does that make sense?
See, it's almost part of that discovery. The challenge might be more that you can spend the danger is you can spend a lot of time doing the discovery, but there's still maybe something that they come up with that we hadn't thought about. But you still need to have some way of handling the ones that you hadn't thought of, if they'd be a right fit or not.
My point is if you've got a good discovery process. So what I do is I give my clients this conversational process that if you follow it paint by numbers, idealistically, which I understand reality is not like this, but idealistically it would get you, if you ticked all the boxes, it would get you to get that fit and value right, and everything would be really smooth. But you're quite right, in reality, you miss stuff because you're going to miss stuff, right? So it's probabilistic. But my point is this: rather than pulling out another magic tool to handle the thing you missed, what I say to my clients is just pick up the same conversational process, have it on the objection. So I'll give you a quick example. The very first step of my conversational process is to establish rapport. You can't go anywhere until you have. That's the very first of 5 steps.
Yeah,
exactly. So what I say to my clients is, when you get that objection, just pick up the same tool, re-establish rapport. So you've had the objection, don't panic fire, don't do anything. Just rebuild the rapport, show your understanding, show your empathy, do all of that stuff. Now you're side by side with them. Then you move to step 2, which is along the lines of discovering and so on. So my point is just rework the same process. You don't have to learn another tool then.
And that tool, I'm sure it'll start with kind of listen first, maybe rephrase what they've said in their words, so you're clear about what you see the challenge being. Acknowledge it, that makes sense. But then some of the response to that might be you reframe that objection. Instead of, oh, this is too expensive, well, what might happen if you don't take this step? Or what were you expecting the cost of it? Is it because you don't have the budget as opposed to it being too expensive? So having a framework, just as you've described, which is listening, it's about acknowledging, showing the empathy, that building that trust, but then responding with something that is appropriate, and maybe reframes what that objection was in the first place. Here's another example. When you're selling technical solutions, software services. So one objection might be, well, your XYZ product doesn't fit with our XYZ system. Although the question might be, does your software integrate with this? Do you work with this? Rather than just saying, yes, it does, you could ask the question, it does, but why is that important?
Yeah, good.
What would happen if it didn't?
Mm.
Because that then gives you far more information. It allows you to compete against maybe competitors who don't do that, but you know what the impact of it is.
Yes.
And again, you can layer on additional value that you can provide because of the fact
Brilliant.
that you do this bit of integration.
I
So an
love.
example, yeah, of not just responding yes, but or no, but asking why is that important?
Especially with objections. I love what you've just said. Especially with, I mean, we should do this anyway, but with an objection, it is a sentence or a question or whatever. It is the tip of the iceberg. And for you to just hear those say 10 words in an objection, there's going to be so much behind it. So
Yeah.
you're quite right.
Yeah.
If you can just, however, via whatever means, get them to dig deeper and explain.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, can you help me understand what you mean by that, or what's related to that, or what would that impact? Ask all those questions. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Who else might be impacted? Is there somebody who this is really important to in your organisation, that we can discuss this with, so we can find a way around that particular challenge or issue that they've got? Use it as a discovery tool rather than just as a yes/no objection handling.
Yeah, and we need to remember that's a great point. And we need to remember as well, sometimes people object, including ourselves when we're buyers. Sometimes you say something at the forefront of your mind, partly because you don't have clarity, sometimes because of an element of fear, or you sense some risk, but you blurt out this thing. If the salesperson can then say to you, you know, explain that, would you? Or can you articulate that? I've done that in front of customers, and they've talked themselves out of the objection and gone, oh, sorry, no, you're right, I'm being silly. You know what I mean? They've acknowledged that they've just said something, and they say, oh, no, you're right, that's not a problem. So sometimes they put it forward, but then they undo it themselves and go, okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's funny that got me thinking, that the way you described it as well, that these objections, and I come back to those five because they're pretty common in probably most sales situations, but they actually appear at different, or I find they appear at different stages of a sales cycle.
Yeah.
So back to this point of preempting, if you can anticipate when they're likely to come up, you can preempt them that bit earlier and maybe have other people in your organization to help support the likely objections that are going to come. So, for example, that objection of, I don't think we've got a need for that particular service at the moment, that tends to come up pretty early on in the process, because without a need, there's no fit, and why would you carry on? So, teasing that one out by understanding, the pain points, what the cost of the pain is, the benefit of what you solve, that's a nice way of framing and coming back against that no need objection, at least to the stage where you're not, like you're saying, trying to bulldoze through something that's never going to fit. But at least if it's a symptom of something, teasing out the kind of there is no need early on is an important objection to get around at the start.
Definitely.
So that feels like a really early one to get out with. And then the no money objection. Those for me are the two critical ones. Is there a need? Is there a budget? Is it a sufficient priority for us to put in budget to solve that problem, because it's a big enough problem to solve, and the benefit of solving it is big enough for our organisation. So those would be the two key objections for me to get out of the way.
Yes, preempt. Yeah, brilliant. I mean, the whole idea of preempting is huge. And again, I don't think people do it enough and necessarily well enough. And I've always said to my clients, look, again, everything's probabilistic. You've got a certain amount of time that you're talking to that customer. You can't cover everything. So I used to say to them, look, what are your most common objections at this stage in the journey? So if it's, let's go right down to, say, a cold call. What are your most common objections in those opening moments of a cold call versus what are your most common objections just before closing, 3 months down the line? Yes. And I get them to list them out. I go, typically it's this, this, or this. There's not normally more than a handful at most. And then I say, you can't preempt them all because you sound like an idiot if you're preempting everything. I said, but you can definitely preempt one, and you might be able to get away with preempting two. So which is the most common one that gets in your... Let's go back to the cold call example. What's the most common one that gets in your way as soon as you start talking to them? They say, it's this. I say, well, let's preempt it. Let's preempt that, and you've just massively increased your chances.
Yes.
I'll give you a quick example, Alex. I haven't cold called for a while now. I've done cold emails and all other things. But back in the day when I was cold calling a lot, The most common one, I was selling sales training and coaching amongst other things. One of the most common ones said to me was, we already have someone that we use.
Yes.
Like, yes, I cottoned on to it. So in my opening words, I would say, no, I'm sure you've already got someone in place that you use. But what I'm interested in is the problems that you face, sales related, that are still sitting on the table. Despite you, that's what I used to say to them. Despite you having someone use, who I'm sure is credible and I'm sure they do provide great value, but what's left in your way? And do you want a conversation about why that's not being fixed?
Yeah.
Because that's the conversation I want with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually love that objection, and I'll tell you why. Because for partly the reasons that you just said, Mark, but one, it shows that whatever your service you're providing is important enough for them to already have a supplier in place.
Yeah, they're a buyer of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd expect you to have some, because it's a really important service, sales training. So I'd expect you to have somebody. The other ways of phrasing or maybe a response to that would be something like, you know, are you 100% happy with with the service that you're getting? Would you ever consider looking at alternatives? Yeah, which is around that kind of gap that you've described. Another one on the same theme is actually saying, what do you really like about this service you're currently getting? Because they will then start talking about what the nice bits are. Because you would then use that if you got a chance to come up with your own proposal. Then you can say, if there was just one thing that could work better or that you could get instead, which is I think where your gap comes in, what might that be?
Yeah.
So that what you then got is the service is important because they've got a supplier. You know what they like about it because you just asked them and they're very happy and open to talk about it. And you're not challenging their decision in any way. And there may just be one thing, because there's always one thing, isn't there, that is a bit irritating or not quite how they wanted it.
Yes.
And that would be your in. And that, I find that quite a useful framework to address that and turn what seems like we've got somebody not interested into something. Yeah, but maybe there's a little bit here that we can do.
It's about spotting the gaps, isn't it? Or reading between the lines. You can't just take a statement and just think, oh, they're fully covered in every way and it's working perfectly and I'm wasting their time. That would be crazy. So it's like, look for the gaps. So, okay, I'm sure it's working in many areas. What I'm interested in is the areas that it's not working that you would like it to be working in.
Yes.
And that's what I'm inviting you to talk to me about. And it's surprising how many people go, oh, well, that sounds smart. Yeah.
Without denigrating, because the person you're speaking to is probably the person who made the decision for that supplier.
Yeah, that's right.
So you don't want to expose, even though they may feel, well, it wasn't quite what I wanted.
Yeah.
So you're asking, what's the great things? Obviously, you made a great decision, but is there something that could make it even better?
Exactly that, Alex. Exactly that. And when they see your intent, when they see your good intent, you're not having a go at the competition. Like often I'll praise them, and just to load it up, I'll say, well, I'm sure the fact that you're using them, I'm sure they're doing some good there, and hopefully that's paying off. But I'm interested in what's if anything's remaining that's not being addressed, or have they, are they taking care of that? But you just get them talking about it, because anyone in that position does want to talk about potential improvement. Where it's relevant.
The current provider doing a great job, they may be expose the fact that it would be great to have some sales training, but it would be great to have some coaching that embedded it. Well, actually, that's what we could do.
There's nearly always something missing, and that applies to us as buyers of whatever as well. We buy what we buy, and there's something we're not buying, and maybe it would be in our interest to have that as well. So it's about finding those gaps.
What about the objection? I'm sure we all come across the same one about I need to think about it. There's no hurry. How do you get the pace going into a deal if it starts to flag? So that I need to think about it. How do we get the energy and the speed up? I've found that ways to answer that would be things like, is it that you just need more time, or that you need more information actually, or there's somebody else that you need to run this by? So again, using that objection to find out really it's a symptom, what's the root cause of I need to think about it. Yes. Is it there's not enough value? Actually, it's back to you. Have you not seen enough value yet? Do you think that the fit's not quite right?
The cost of the problem. Because here's an analogy for you. Imagine it literally is a leaking tap in your house, and let's say it's a proper leak. You wouldn't have to think about it. So you get the plumber on the phone, you're not going to go, well, give me a moment to think about it. Your water's gushing everywhere. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, you go, like, just get round. Get
Yeah.
round.
What? Yeah, with the key, which is the key thing, is that cost of inaction is critical. But you then you have to know what the value of it is. So there's a prep work needed to get the cost of inaction, because you have to understand what the impact is.
It's why I encourage people to get in there, not too early on that. You need to do all the usual things, like get the rapport going and get the conversation, get the spotlight on the right things that matter to that buyer, because you've got to do that quickly. But as quickly as I can, I try to draw their attention towards the cost. And that includes potential opportunity cost, the more obvious costs. But the quicker you can get them onto it, and not necessarily quantify it, you can quantify it if you want, but just emotionally get them onto it. Do you know what I mean? But it's the minute you can draw that onto the cost of delay. So if I can talk to my customers and say, well, if you feel like you're missing this per month, let's work out what you're missing out on per day. If we break that down, or per week, or whatever the unit is. Yeah, and it's like, so your leaky tap is dripping out money at that rate. Is that right? And you're responsible for it. So it's your job to... And they go, yeah, right, okay, so it's fine. So we could pick this up in 6 months if you want, but let's look at the cost of doing that. Or we could pick it up in a couple of days. It's a case of just helping them think through their own situation ethically, so that they arrive and go, okay.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that the fact that these different objections come up different stages of the sales cycle, that point you made about emotion, I've certainly found that one of the objections that rears its head typically at the end of the sales process is that emotional fear. Have they made a right decision? Is that fear of a risk? Maybe it's a financial risk that they're taking, maybe a professional one, because they're putting their name behind the decision to go with you, for example. The objections that can come out, which are the symptoms, could be about budget, about can you do it in time, have you got the resources, how sure can we be about the return on investment we've assumed as a result of putting this in. So those kind of objections that come in typically towards the end are ones that I've seen. Actually, the underlying issue is about risk. How have you convinced them that you can deliver on the promises that is the basis of their decision to go with you? They will appear at the end if you haven't addressed them previously.
Perfectly put. So it's in your interest to address them and to know them, and that gives them reassurance that you as a seller are coming in and you know the likely risks and you understand them and you empathise,
Yes.
and you've come along with a few ideas to reduce those risks or whatever it is. That's good selling,
Really good point, which actually ties in with the point you're making right at the beginning.
Yes.
That a good seller will preempt those objections, because that provides confidence to the customer that you've thought about it, you've come across them before, they're not alone, and you have ways of addressing them that are appropriate for that particular situation. It's about giving confidence and trust to the customer.
And just showing them through your actions and behaviours that you have thought this through so well, through your experience, through whatever, but you know how to help them make that decision ethically and in a customer-centric way that is designed to have them make the right decision and make them better off than they would be otherwise. And if you can just show them that, they're like, oh, yeah, great, trusted advisor. Do you know what I mean? And it is. And then, of course, again, with the objections, there should be a mindset that this is not about me batting the ball back to them, or it's not about me wrestling them into position, which I think a lot of salespeople are trained to think.
Yeah.
But it's about me working with them. This is why my websites help people buy. You're there to collaborate, to cooperate, to work together to arrive at a sensible decision between you. Not one where I'm twisting your arm, not one where I've wrestled your objections to the ground and exhausted you. You know what I mean? I've just helped you make it comfortably with confidence. Yeah. And if you can leave both parties feeling really good about the conversation, then I think that's almost like the mecca. That's the goal. We both feel good about that. I think that's a good thing to aim for.
Beautifully put, Mark. Yeah, and back to the fit and the value. Yeah, great way to end.
Yeah, thanks. Good stuff. Good to talk to you again, Alex.